Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is the ChronoCast podcast. Behind every uniform is a nervous system. Behind every call answered, a human being. Trauma doesn't always announce itself, but healing should never feel out of reach. So welcome to the ChronoCast podcast, where we explore the technologies, therapies, and human stories reshaping recovery for veterans and first responders. I'm Kelly Winkler, Blake Miles, Anthony Knopps with you here today. This space exists for one reason, to move the conversation forward and bring better tools to the people who give so much of themselves in service to others. Today's guest brings a rare combination of experience and perspective. Anthony Knopps, welcome. He has spent over 20 years working in communications, public policy, and storytelling inside government, across global media, and now in higher education. He's the chair of political science at Adrian College. He's worked on issues ranging from misinformation and media sustainability with the National Endowment for Democracy to food insecurity through the Global Food Institute. He's an Emmy award-winning creator, a TEDx speaker, and the author of several books, including The No Fail Mission. Beyond these titles, what stood out to me is the range of work. High-pressure political environments, all the way to writing kids' stories, children's stories, inspired by personal moments, including his own journey through recovery and resilience. So welcome again, Anthony. I'm so glad you're here.
Glad to be
So as
here.
I said, thank you. You've operated across government, media, academia, and storytelling. What would you say is the thread that actually ties all that together for you?
Well, I think if you look at it, authenticity is the coin of the realm. If you're not authentic, you don't have trust. You can't succeed in any of these environments, and particularly in the global landscape in which we are finding ourselves. If you're not authentic, the audience knows right away, and they will not engage with you. And if you are authentic, then you at least get them to look up.
Yeah, I couldn't love that answer more, honestly. Thank you so much. So do you feel personally responsible for solving things in the world, or what problem do you feel responsible for?
Well, I think, and I had this discussion with some students yesterday. We need to mitigate the cynicism that's out there. People are cynical because they don't have trust in either their government leaders, their neighborhood leaders, the people who live under their roof. Trust takes a long time to create, and it takes only seconds to lose. And no matter what space you're in, if you're in veterans affairs, if you're in government policy, if you're in food insecurity, if you're in misinformation, trust is a key component of all that. And if you don't have the trust, you don't have the audience, and you don't have the engagement. And when you don't have audience and you don't have engagement, you can't really get anywhere. Part of the challenge that I have both professionally and academically is to create that environment where we can build trust and show audiences that there's more than one path, that there are good people in the world out trying to do good things. And that's one reason for ChronoScape.
Yeah, that's encouraging. I appreciate you saying that. Sometimes I feel like I teeter lately between skeptical, cynical, hope. So I like your perspective just because you've done a lot more in your life than me, So for you to have that perspective, I really appreciate that. How about you, Blake?
I think the thing about the skepticism, because I think I would put myself under that category pretty squarely.
Sure.
And I think if I had to put a word to it, skepticism wouldn't exactly be right. It's just there's been no real accountability of the problems that have gone on for decades. And it's not even just years or months, it's decades at this point. So, from the direction that I came from the military first, there's this what is it, the moral wound, or there's a word for it when you have an expectation of or being put into harm's way for a specific cause, and then questions arise later of that specific cause and the wound that creates. There's a specific term for it, but like that's kind of the angle that I've came from it. And Anthony, I think you have a much different perspective because you're coming at it from a different environment entirely,
Right.
almost. So
I think the challenge here is to be brutally honest. We have kicked the can down the road for so many years on a bunch of different policy issues. For example, food insecurity. I'm working with the Global Food Institute right now. We're trying to look at ways to deal with mental health in this space, and we're not talking necessarily the mental health of the people that are receiving the aid, but the people who are in the food banks, and that they see the same people every week. They give them a bag of food. They turn around, and the next week, the same people are back asking for the same bag of food. So the idea of achievement from the perspective of the food service worker isn't there, because they're like, what am I doing? They're just going to be here next week. And I think, your military background, there's kind of an echo there, because yes, we go and
Perfect.
we take care of this, but what happens next? And even something as far removed from our perspective as the Arab Spring, it started with one person setting himself on fire at a food stand, and they had elections a year later, free and fair elections, and over the course of the next decade, they had 12 different governments. So people are going, "What did we do this for? Why did we get involved? Why did we?" Do this when we're not seeing any definitive action come out of it, and I think that's kind of the common thread that you've seen in your service, that I've seen across different platforms, that yes, you have success for a mere moment, but then what happens next? I tell my students, like, war's always in, but what is the day after that? And then the day after that. And if we can't define that, then we're just,
No, that I was thinking that's an excellent analogy. It's a microcosm of the macrocosm problem. I was curious to know if, like, the thing that stood out to me in that analogy the most was not so much that moment, the realization of, like, well, what am I doing this for? What was the point of all that? Taking it down the road even further from my military background and looking at it from an unconventional warfare perspective, I can see all of the fingerprints of the same sort of things that I would have been doing had I been going into another country and creating dissension and chaos and destabilizing governments. So that's where I fall into that moral wound territory, and it starts to get really fuzzy, I guess. So from that perspective, I don't know, do you have any take on that, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is fuzzy, because when you look at history, we're so in the moment as a society. We have an attention span that shifts every 7 seconds, every 6 seconds. If you believe the latest study from Ohio State, we're not long term thinkers. And I think that's a problem. And then when you go back and you look at history is not kind. When you look at the reasons why governments fall or governments rise, reasons why democracies succeed or these fail, um, you know, there's no one universal answer as to why it worked, why it didn't. And often it just takes one person to go, no, we're gonna go this way, and make a difference. There's so many instances in history of a person who said, that's not really a good thing. Vasily Arkhipov in the Cuban Missile Crisis, he refused to turn the key. And had he turned the key, we probably wouldn't be here. If we did, it'd be Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Uh, those kind of pinpricks in history are important to realize that it's not easy. If it was easy, we would already have done it, and that goes for anything. If it was easy to take that hill, we would have taken that hill. If it's easy to win that battle, we would have won that battle. And I think it creates an environment where it's easy to go, I'm not going to do that. But there's a demand that we do that, because we're trying to create a better environment for the people who follow us. And I think that has to be the shining star. We have to be able to go, why are we doing this? What's the benefit, not for us, but for the next generation? If we frame our ideas that way, I think we're in a better environment to get to where we can live with it, but more importantly, that the people who come after us, we're creating an environment where they can succeed.
Sure. Okay, so kind of along those lines, because you've had boots on the ground experience in Washington, basically, or high proximity to those making decisions, what would you say people misunderstand the most about that power? And I might be asking this more for my own curiosity, but
I'm
because I
curious
know we don't
too.
want to, yeah, I don't want to stay on this subject too long. I know you have a ton to say, but yeah, can you speak a little bit more about that? So, what would people misunderstand most about how power actually works?
I think uh, the first, 2 or 3 times you're in the room when those decisions are made, there's this aura about it. Uh, but then it becomes what are we going to do today? How are we going
Mm.
to uh, improve the situation today? And when you look at democracies around the world, and then you look at our democracy, what are we trying to do today? Uh, what's the end game? And if we don't have a viable strategy for even something as I say simple, but it's far from simple, like the Farm Bill, what are we trying to do? What are we in a problem? And if we don't have the one, two, three, four direct steps that we need, then we have to go back and look at it. It's like
Mm.
I'm a girl dad. My daughter played college basketball, and
Oh, cool.
if you're trying to win the game, but you have all the practices that come before. You have the shoot around in the morning. You have the locker room conversation beforehand. But it's getting out into the arena and making that play, and then being able to adjust, because if we do this, we know we're not going to win. But finding that right play to, if not win the game, but put yourself in the best position to do that. And I think it's important for both the people in the room and the people outside the room that if we clearly identify what the wins are, then it becomes much easier to define uh, what we're doing. If we're not authentic, back to authentic. If we're not
Mm.
authentic with the public, then we're not going to succeed, because if we don't communicate effectively, if we don't build that trust, we're not going to be there. And I think some of the biggest lessons that I've learned uh, from my time in that space is that there are so many good people out to do the best they can for their country, be it in the military, be it in public service, be it whatever. And those people don't care who gets the credit. And if you surround yourself with those people, you're going to be successful.
Okay, so there are people that are still humble. That's amazing. I love it. Okay, so kind of still along those lines, you wrote the book, The No Fail Mission, and you explore zero error environments. So I guess kind of using the idea of your daughter, you were talking about being in the locker room and creating this play. And then, like you said, you go into the court and you kind of don't know what's going to happen.
Mhm.
Anyway, so in this book, you explore zero air environments. What does that do to a person over time? Because that sounds like a lot of pressure.
It is an incredible amount of pressure, because when you serve the office of the president, uh, you can't afford to make a mistake, because if you make a
Yeah.
mistake, the whole world knows about it.
Yeah.
So there's incredible pressure on not just the person, but on their family. And this is a 60-hour a week environment, if not more. You don't see the sunrise and you don't see the sunset,
Oh,
and it creates an unusual level of camaraderie, because you're in this environment, but it also creates moments where you're like, wow, I'm really doing this. One of the people I profiled in the first volume is a first generation American. Her family came here and she was posted to the White House, and she's bringing in some documents to the Oval, so military. And she's bringing in some documents to the Oval for the president. And somebody behind her goes, "Hey, I'll get that," and opened the door to the Oval. And she turned around, and it was President Obama. And she's thinking to herself, I'm a first generation American, and the president of the United States opened the door for me. Uh,
uh-huh.
and that is, it's just, it was mind numbing to her, And in the second book, volume 2 is coming out in July. I
Oh,
talked
cool.
to older presidential service badge holders, including one that was there. He actually flew Army One. They call him Marine One now, but it was Army One. And he flew Johnson and his wife back to the White House from Andrews the night of the assassination. And being there in that moment, what was that like? Talked to another gentleman who was on Reagan's or on President Clinton's detail for the 50th anniversary at Normandy, and he's watching the missing man formation. Looks up in the sky, Air Force guy. He's got a tear in his eye, and he looks over, and there's another gentleman next to him that's got a tear in his eye too, and that was Walter Cronkite.
Ah,
It's just amazing how history puts people in certain moments and how they react to them. But you're right, they can't fail. When President Obama was notorious for changing his speeches at the last minute, which is presidents are wont to do that. But when a speech gets cleared, it has to go back through some protocols and has to end end up through the pipeline. And there was one event in Moscow where the presidential aide was bringing the speech up the steps of the Kremlin to where the president was, and the Soviet. The Russian security guard said, "No, you can't come." And he goes, "This is for the president. You'll have to shoot me later." And he walks in, and as the president's walking into the room, he hands the president the draft that had been cleared.
okay. Wow.
Nobody knows that. Those are the things that nobody knows because it's all out of sight, out of mind. And those are the high stress points that nobody knows about, and nobody should know about them, because if they do, then you've failed in your duty to the president. If everybody knows what happened, so
Well,
incredible.
yeah, this is going to get cut, but I can't imagine what they're doing with the current president. Anyways, moving on. I don't see any of those speeches getting cleared. And we're back. So within leadership and influence, let's bring it back to positive. So you emphasize developing people, which I love this idea about that. So what would you say the difference between someone who leads effectively and someone who just holds authority?
That's a great question. I think there are a lot of leaders that don't have the title, that lead
Mm,
by, and Blake can affirm this, because you don't have to have the cluster on your shoulder to lead. Some of the strongest leaders are the ones that don't always have to say anything. That they have that gravitas that you see in battle, that you can speak to, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say there's when you're in a special forces, company, battalion, you're around a bunch of other special forces guys every day. So it's a very high bar to begin with, but when all of those guys are in a group together, it's fractal almost. There's always one or two guys that seem to just have the dominating charisma of the room, and they're the leaders. Even if they're not even the highest rank, they're just the de facto leader of the group because they carry the weight behind their voice. So it's almost like a dual hierarchy of leadership, because even though, yeah, we know we got that guy in charge, but this guy over here, we trust his word that much more.
Yeah, and
Anthony,
trust is part of that.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, with leadership, I'm like, so your current role at Adrian College, I'm like especially excited that you are part of teaching the next generation, because I am loving your perspective. So you probably, I don't know if this generation currently in college is feeling how unstable the world and how polarized it is. I'm guessing they're aware. What would you say today's students need that traditional education still isn't giving them?
Yeah, I mean, every day I come away encouraged that when I get to a point where I'm looking up at the grass and they're in charge, that we'll be in good shape, because this more than any other generation is a generation that's been through school shooter drills in school. they've been through in a lot of words the Great Recession. They know they had families. They were part of a family that had that challenge. They had a school shooter. They've been through COVID, and they don't suffer fools lightly.
Mhm.
And when I have conversation with them, I teach a lot of comparative democracy, international relations, diplomacy, speech writing, those kind of courses. These students are very clear as to what the challenges are. The challenge in global geopolitics, in AI, in reducing unemployment from 1834. These are all issues that I tell them that my generation screwed up. It's up to you guys to fix. And they're like, we got
Mhm.
this. And
Amazing.
we have conversations yesterday in the final democracy class about if you could fix one thing, what would it be? And so we broke them up into groups, and then they got to pitch their ideas to an adjacent group, and the other group got to tear it apart. And the ideas that they had were really really thought provoking as to how to make sure AI is a tool and not a crutch. How to be creative thinkers, because those who are creative thinkers are one step ahead of everybody else. Outsources their answers
Yeah.
to the technology. So I think we're going to be in good shape. These students, both at Adrian and also at George Washington University, where I teach, uh, they're prepared because they recognize the challenges there. They're just not going to put up with it. And I think we'll be in good shape. I am, people would say that's cautious optimism, but I don't think there's anything cautious about it at all. I think they've got it.
I love that. Like, you've got younger kids right now too. What are the ages of yours?
12 and 9.
Okay. Yep. Mine are 15 and 9. I didn't realize we had kids the same, about the same.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Anthony, thank you. I love that. I too speak well of this generation. I really do. I think maybe there's the impression that they just grew up with AI and don't know how to think, but it sure seems like, okay, well, I'll just give my example here. My son has self-taught himself on so many things using YouTube. And so it seems like they've just like without being taught have adapted really well and have almost like thrived with technology. Like they've really captured it well and just like really thriving at life.
I was going to ask Anthony. So I think the analogy that hits my head on this AI learning discussion and the future generation and how they're going to be impacted is like with going through the special forces training. One of the first things that one of the hurdles you have to get through is land navigation with a map and a compass and a protractor and a pencil and carrying weight in your back. And so obviously not using, you have GPS, it's available, but what you're not allowed to use it for this test.
Mhm.
And the reason is because you need to be able to rely on yourself at the ground level in case things fail. So I was wondering from you, seems like it's a danger of teaching or people learning how to think versus learning what to think. And then if it's what to think, then the question is who is deciding what is taught. And that's
Ooh,
where my danger area goes. So I was wondering if you could talk
love
on that
that.
for a second.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. In the political science realm, I had this discussion with one of our deans the other day. Is a good political science professor should create an environment where all ideas have value. And if you do your job well, your students should not know your personal beliefs.
Mhm.
I will take the contrarian side all the time, and the student's like, wait a minute, I thought you but yeah. and uh and I was like, no, you'll never know who I am.
Love
You
that.
just I just and I teach a campaigns and elections course as campaign in real time, and in the fall of 26, 28, 30. And it's all about reading and reacting to the spur of the moment. What happened this morning? Why is that a big deal? How does that impact the campaign? And I tell them, I don't care who you vote for. I really don't. I just care that you go out and vote, be a part of the process, be engaged, go be a door knocker, go you know, go run a phone bank, go serve, because I think that's the lesson that's important. No matter how you serve in the military, you serve in political office, you can serve supporting a campaign, you serve with an NGO. But what are you doing to make the environment better? And if you want to pick up a rifle and stand at post, great. I'll support you 100%. And if you want to go work at the French embassy, I'll help you do that. We got students that we're working on placing for summer internships. Wherever your passion is, you have to feed that, because there are so many and this, Blake. There's so much negativity out there, and it's so easy to get sucked into that. And it's up to us not to fall into that hole. And if we do fall into that hole, we've got to make sure there's somebody there that's willing to help us get out. And I gave a spring convocation keynote address last month about turning apathy into empathy. And there's way too much apathy out there, and there's not enough empathy. And what can we do? Because we have an obligation, I think, to the people around us to lift them up. And if we don't lift them up, then conversely, what are we doing to get the help we need? That's one reason for Chronoscape is what can we do to help those that are dealing with TBI like I am, or dealing with PTSD like I am, to go, is to not be dismissive, but to actually uplift, and to show that there's a different path, because it is so easy, particularly in that few quiet moments before you fall asleep, to have the negative memories fall in. And what can we do to mitigate that? And I think the more that we recognize that this is not just a problem that you're dealing with, you're not just okay, because how many times do we say, "Oh, how are you doing?" "Well, I'm fine." And no, it's okay to say I'm not fine, and then to open that door to have somebody help out.
Yeah. So your work on traumatic brain injury obviously is personal. You personally experienced that. So Anthony, I'm not sure the timing of your life, and I apologize for that. So basically take this number however you want, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but what's something that you believe now that you just couldn't have understood before that injury?
Well, my accident happened in 2019. So I
Okay.
was in a, my son and I were running errands. He was driving. We got hit by a distracted driver who was fumbling for her phone. So almost a head-on crash. And we both went to hospital, got checked out. We were both fine. And then 6 weeks later, nothing worked. And my wife was like, let's go to the ER, let's get yourself checked out. And, I'm a typical guy. So I went, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, get your butt in the car. And, got in the car and, tried to explain what was going on when I got to the ER. And they were like, you're just incoherent, and was sent to the level 1 trauma center in town. And hour and a half later, it's on the table for emergency brain surgery, because since in that 6 week intervening period between the accident and when I got to the hospital, blood had pooled in my brain. And had I gone to bed that night, I wouldn't have gotten up. And that's alarming. I was in the ICU for a while. I had to relearn how to walk, how to talk. And as somebody who came uh, from a journalistic reporting background, not being able to talk was a challenge. But being able to go through the process, and even now, 7 years, June from the accident, you still have that. You overanalyze things. You look at well, the average survival rate after a TBI is 5 years, and you're like,
Wow.
TikTok, you're in 7. So there's a lot of things that you have to control, and I'm blessed to have a really good a medical team, psychologist and neurologist and everybody else who is like, you know what your limits are, don't breach them. And it took a while because you're a type A personality. You get the story at 9 o'clock and it's on the air by 5. You can't do that now. So you have to be able to go, no, sit your butt down. That's not going to happen. And that took a while. And sharing those lessons, I think, both as a TEDx speaker, as a convocation speaker, as in other speaking environments, when you talk about TBI, a lot of people cringe. And I had this conversation with a bunch of CEOs at an event. I said, would you hire somebody with a broken arm? Yeah, of course, absolutely. Would you hire somebody with a broken leg? Well, yeah, they're going to get better. Would you hire somebody with a traumatic brain injury and they recoil?
Sure.
And they're like, I said, would you be surprised that you're talking to somebody with one?
Oh,
And they just are what? And I think there's that challenge that those with TBI have, that they're never going to be whole again.
yeah.
And because the perspective outside, in society doesn't, I don't, you know, it's hard to say. It doesn't give grace. I don't think. A lot of leaders will, you know, if you tell people you have a TBI, then they're like, well, what's gonna, and it's a problem. And the more I think we can educate people about traumatic brain injury is just a disability like anything else, then I think, if we can convince one person, then it's a win. And it's just getting to that point where people account for it, and that they're more than just headaches, as a president once said. And that's one of the comments that I made in the children's book. It's like, no, they're not just headaches. They're life-changing moments, and the more we realize that, I think the better off we are.
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining that. I've learned more about it even just from this conversation. I really appreciate you explaining that. And just to bring it all home, I know you said to your students, like, oh, you'll never learn who I really am. But here's what I know about you. No matter who you vote for, I see you as this very kind person with a lot of empathy. And perhaps through, your journalism experience, like just that curiosity of both sides, and then being the leader that's like, what does today look like? What can we do today? Anyway, bringing it back to you, I love who you are. And I am so encouraged that you are teaching a younger generation.
I had a question that might tie some other threads together. Just see if I
Perfect.
can weave this. So looking at ChronoScape as a tool, and thinking about, for example, that I didn't remember his name, but the Russian during the Cuban missile crisis that didn't turn the key. And when you were talking about that, I'm thinking through that memory from that guy's eyes. Like if memories of that magnitude, from that's a global history leverage point. History is hinging on a specific moment, one specific individual. Like that memory from that person's perspective and his eyes, with context before and even context afterwards. What do you think, like being able for your students to be able to look at that memory from that person's eyes, how do you think that would change their perspective of global events in general?
I think it is hugely important. We spend in my international relations class, we look at both the Cuban Missile Crisis. We also look at Able Archer in the East, where it was another at that point, in each case, a Soviet soldier that went no. This was a person who was a radar tech, a huge point of tension between NATO and the Warsaw Pact. And the Warsaw Pact was convinced that a NATO exercise was just a prelude to invasion. And the radar showed some inbound targets coming in. And the gentleman was like, no, I just don't think that was what happened. And he refused to accelerate it up the chain of command. And he was vilified. He was vilified for it. And he left the service, became an alcoholic, was just not seen as somebody that would make a difference. And then 20 years later, at a gathering of both U.S. and Russian diplomats, his story came out and how he made the right decision to save civilization, because he's like, no, no, no. And it turns out that what the radar scope had showed was the reflection of the sun off the clouds. And had he done his duty, he would have it would not have ended well. And that's something we tend to forget. But it's those are the moments, those are the memories that are hard, I think, uh, to separate out, because he was recognized in his final years of life as a hero, but in that interim period, he was a nobody. And I think there are, not to that level, but there are a lot of people that not just serve, but first responders and other people who go through a traumatic event, that have a challenge on what to do next. How do I get through the day? And if we can help uplift them, it's getting back to, how do we turn apathy? Oh, my day's just gonna stink, into empathy, where I've got people that are around me that can help me. I think the better off we're gonna be. But not getting a paper done is one thing, not having the world in, and that's one thing that Stanislav Petrov was able to do. He correctly identified it as not a missile strike, and those are stories that the students never have heard before. They don't know Arkhipov, they don't know Petrov, but two people in 20 years apart that had a significant impact on how the world was evolved. And it's not something gets taught, but when we have that discussion with them, they're like, "Well, how come nobody's told us this before?" And it's like, I don't know.
That question right there, every time I've asked that question, it's been a very interesting road for the next few days, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you wonder what other things don't we hear about?
Yeah.
If this happened in 83, what happened in 2003? What happened, what happened a week ago? What are things that are out there that we don't know? And, when you go back to the no fail mission, and it's kind of the same thing. How many, I was approached to tell these stories because, well, these people have never shared their stories before. And as a reporter, if you hear that, wait a minute, nobody shared these stories before, you're like,
undiscovered puzzle pieces. Exciting.
Right? I'm obsessed. Yeah.
And I've got, when the first book came out, was some folks from the White House. I went, this looks like a 10-volume edition. And I'm like, slow your roll. But we'll get the second one coming out, and then I've already got people lined up for the third one. So as long as these fingers type, I think I'm going to be okay. But you just don't know. And this next book, I'm so humbled to have a former head of the White House military office with an endorsement, a former chief military aide to George W. Bush have it, and the forward is by President Clinton. So
love that.
it got
amazing.
I had some serious imposter syndrome after I got that.
I bet.
Got that back and made a couple edits and sent it back. And somebody goes, "Did you just redline the president?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Then in 5 minutes, I got it back and said,
That's a duty question. Your duty before.
Okay, well, conversations like this I truly believe this is how we drive culture forward. So thank you so much for being here today, everything that you've shared. I do want to encourage anyone you have a lot of materials and knowledge to give us. So we're going to put links to those things in the show notes. Any final words for us, Anthony?
No, I just think to be your most authentic self, and a lot of that will take care of everything else. If you're authentic, then you build trust. If you build trust, then you have engagement. You have engagement, then you can move stuff forward. But it all starts with being authentic.
What a great ending. Yeah. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Anthony.
All right. That's a wrap.